Have you done the Beverly Hills Art Show before?
Yeah, I participated in both the spring and the fall of last year's events.
How did it go for you? Did you enjoy it? I mean, obviously, it's a very nice time, but there's also sales.
Yeah, it was great. I made a lot of connections with a lot of obviously people that I haven't met before. So it was quite a wonderful experience, and also my work is a little unique for the show.
How so?
Well, I built two of the walls of my tent using 12.5-foot by 7-foot paintings. I would say they're a little larger than most of the paintings that were shown.
Just a little. Now, you consider yourself a narrative painter?
I'm a narrative painter, but I don't necessarily single myself into one category. I paint many different subjects and many different ideas. When I first got interested in drawing and painting, I came from a classics background. So I studied the great books in college. So my head was full of ideas for pictures. I think that has enabled me to keep an open perspective on what pictures can be. Therefore, I don't really fall into any particular genre, and I don't make the same paintings over and over.
Do you work in a series when you're making one painting? Are the paintings right before and right after it kind of the same, or are you working on one series here, one series there?
I have done both. In particular, like some of the chef paintings. When I was making some of those paintings, I was making a lot of those paintings together.
Let's go through some. Is that a self-portrait?
Yes, I threw in a couple of early drawings and paintings that I did when I was training, just so that you could see sort of the technical background that I come from. A year of training in Italy, and then about 6.5 years in New York City. I also spent a number of years doing apprenticeships, and I worked particularly with 3 different artists who have had a big influence on me.
How big is this portrait? Let's start there, because everybody's got a different screen. So when some people's looking on their phone, it's going to be like a postage stamp. How big is this?
This is a portrait that I did a number of years ago, sort of as part of my academic training. I'd say it was about 22 inches wide by 30 inches tall.
Oil?
Yeah, oil. I've always sort of been drawn to oil painting. So this painting is a large landscape painting that I did. That is, it's 5 foot by 4 foot. So.
Fallen trees, is there a metaphor, a narrative? What's going on here?
This was also part of a series of paintings that I did, all based on, living in the Southwest in northern New Mexico. We have a lot of fires and a lot of forest fires. And so I did a whole series of paintings based on forest fires. And when I was working on those, that was one of those times, Matt, where I just was absorbed in making multiple paintings of forest fire landscapes all at the same time. So,
was it a culture shock to go from the Southwest to Beverly Hills for the art show?
Yes, it's definitely an interesting contrast. Luckily, we have a couple of friends here in Taos who have been very encouraging to me to participate in the show, and they have said basically this is the one show, if you ever do an outdoor sort of show, this is the one show you should participate in. The difference between my small town and being in LA and Beverly Hills is quite a contrast.
What are we looking at here? We've got, is that you rowing the boat?
No, it's not. It's a friend of mine. When I was young, I grew up spending a lot of time in the outdoors, and I used to do a lot of fly fishing. And so this was just a painting that I made based on a memory of a friend of mine who he and I got up early one morning to go out fishing, and I was trying to break away from that traditional academic training and start making some more inventive paintings, and paintings based on memories and experiences metaphors and things like that. And so this was a push in that direction.
Is it tough to sell and let go of a painting this personal?
For me, it's not, because I often make paintings. When I got into drawing and painting late in life, I was exposed to art quite a bit growing up, but then I sort of thought that it wasn't something that I wanted. So I took a different path. And then when I came back around and found drawing and painting, I was doing it basically just for the joy of making things and for the joy of somebody else receiving that. And so when somebody purchases a painting of mine, the fact that they're buying the painting actually brings me a huge amount of joy. It's actually better for me to let go of it and for them to enjoy it than for me to hang on to it.
So what are we looking at here?
So when I first started pushing in that direction of inventing outside of the studio, because of my classics background, I was obsessed with allegory and narratives and stories. I wanted to make a painting that was based on Plato's allegory of the cave, which is in Book 6 of the Republic. So I kind of had some visions of making a painting of some shadows on a cave wall and things like that. Usually I end up kind of meditating on an idea for a year or so before it actually begins its process. And so slowly but surely this painting sort of took form in my mind. And I wanted to kind of translate the idea of a contemporary philosopher being an artist. And so in the allegory of the cave, Plato is basically describing the philosopher as being one who is able to break free of their chains in a cave and leave the cave and see the world for what it really is, and then return to the cave and try and explain to us all the world, which we only understand as shadows being cast on a wall. And so I sort of took and translated that idea into an artist painting that shadow into 3 dimensions.
You know, the abstract painter Robert Motherwell did a whole series of Plato's caves. You know, so it's not just confined to a more realistic narrative.
Yeah, of course.
So I mean, I think it has a broad appeal over a large time span. You see realism. Do you confront abstraction at all?
Yes, many of my favorite painters are actually abstract painters. Being out here in Taos, I've been exposed to a lot of great minimalist art over the years. You know, Agnes Martin was here. Tuttle is not too far from here, down in Abiquiu. And then, you know, obviously down in Marfa, you have Donald Judd and some of those construction.
Big neighborhood there, eh?
Yeah, so I've always been aware of and very drawn into abstract work. But at the same time, maybe because of my background in literature and philosophy, I'm such a literal person that I see the world in pictures and a physicality of space.
Perfect example right here, your box.
Yeah.
Talk about the box works. The minute I saw them, I fell in love with them. I felt like, and there's so many of them. You still do? Are you still doing this series? Do you do it once in a while? Did you just blast it out and you're done with it?
I was doing this series for a while, and you know, I haven't made any of these in a little while, but it's never really that far from what I'm trying to do. Even in my narrative paintings, when we move forward in the presentation, you'll see that these ideas, I start to incorporate these ideas. So in this example, I'm bringing in the box idea, and then like in the bottom center one, I'm taking that box idea and populating it with imaginary figures. In the one that's on the left, it becomes almost like a cityscape, landscape out, you know, nightscape out the window.
When you had mentioned minimalism being out there, Marfa, Texas even, I mean, there's a a kind of taking on of Donald Judd, would you say?
Oh, well, I think it's an appreciation and a playing with Judd. You know, when I was young, I probably wouldn't have appreciated Judd as much. And then when I went to grad school, I started to read a lot about the ideas behind minimalism, and it became so much more interesting to me to think about the way that the space exists and is contained within like Judd's boxes, for example, and that they're a definition of space inside and space outside, and it's not necessarily about the object itself, but it's about the things that it contains or that it separates from.
My favorite painting of yours is up right now.
Yeah.
Just, you know, speaking of it, there could be a Judd going on here. Tell us what's going on here. This is, to me, a thrilling piece.
So this was based off of reading essays by Michael Fried, and he kept talking about the interaction that people have with minimalist sculptures and minimalist work. In particular, you know, that the way that we engage a sculpture defines our relationship to that sculpture. And so he was drawing all of these, at least the way that I was reading his essays, he was drawing sort of a problem with minimalism, because every viewer is going to be engaging it in a different way and from a different angle and things like that. And so I kind of was creating this painting as though one of Judd's boxes or a minimalist sculpture is theatrically performing, and just kind of playing off of that idea of, you know, it doesn't matter how we think we're perceiving a work of art, whether it's, you know, the two of us sitting down and watching a Coen Brothers movie or reading a piece of poetry. You and I are both going to be bringing different elements to the table. So I think that we're always doing that. And so I sort of wanted to lay it out in a imaginative theatrical painting.
It's so great. Here's a question from somebody who's watching our live cast.
Sure.
Was there a particular book or type of book that influenced your artwork?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure if I have ever thought about it from a single work standpoint. I know that when I was first starting to draw and paint, I had gotten out of a very intense 4-year classics background, and so I was trying to kind of take a break from a lot of heavy and deep reading at that time. So I was reading a lot of poetry, and that initially was an impact in the way that I was thinking and seeing and relating to my initial drawing and painting experiences. And then as I've continued to develop over the past 15 or 16 years in drawing and painting, my reading interests and sort of curiosity about every different subject and topic is often expressed through books. And so I'm constantly tapping into classic works, whether it's Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. I really love Russian literature. So Russian literature definitely has had its impact on my work over the years. But then also in the past 4 or 5 years, through making some new friends and things like that out here in the Southwest, I've finally, at this age, I've delved into some fantasy and some sci-fi. And so now I'm reading a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, and it's really interesting stuff. And sometimes it's not the, you know, it's not the best literature or whatever. But in terms of what it holds for me, in terms of creating a visual, imaginative space, I'm finding it's really great fun. So, I mean, I've read a lot of economics books just for fun. I just read a lot of everything, and people find it weird, but I find it's just a way of
you got this great combination of the cerebral and the sensuous in the paintings. Somebody's asking a question: do you take photos first, then put them together as a sample? I'm curious if you're working on computers. When you're, you know, what are you attempting to paint? a photograph source, or are they all live models?
So my training was all live models, and a lot of the places where I worked sort of heavily criticized the use of photography. Now, over my career, I've had to do a lot. I've done a lot of commission work. It's very rare that I would ask somebody to sit for 6 weeks to do a formal portrait. So in that case, I do take photography and use it. One of the things that I often do is my paintings are invented. A lot of them are invented, and so whether it's a painting like this one, which is there and it's here in the background and it's in progress. So that painting I'm doing, I've decided I wanted to do some large landscape paintings again, all from life. I'm taking these paintings out into the landscape for a 10-day period each year and working on them.
So you get the same, the sun's in the same place, the light's the same.
Exactly. So the light's all the same and the atmosphere is the same. And those experiences are one way of making paintings, but it's not the only way of making paintings. As my father has always said, he said, if you look at Picasso's work and you think Picasso didn't use photographs, well, you're wrong. Like, they used every tool that was at their disposal all the time in order to make the work that they considered to be the most powerful and dominant. So,
quick question: is this train? Is this the does the Amtrak go over that?
No, this is the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge, which is just a 2-lane bridge that was built in, I think it was the early 60s, maybe the late 50s, and it's the second highest arched bridge like that in the country.
Reed, I consider you to be one of the great examples of where the cerebral meets the sensuous. I just want to leave us with that. But if you have any final words, please.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody at the Beverly Hills Art Show who's put out all this effort.
Great staff.
Yeah, for putting together these interviews and putting the show online for us. And thank you to you, Matt, because whenever I have a chance to have interesting conversations about my work and think about it and reflect on it, there's definitely new ideas that are always, and so then get worked back into my process. And
it was fun.